Hello again, everyone. So I've had several requests from people who have been watching my collage videos on how I do my collage papers. Because if you remember in one of my videos, I said probably 95% of the papers that I use in my collages are papers that I've made. And so I've had some questions on how I made some of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a couple of videos on how I do my painted papers. The first one I'm going to do is going to be about creating solids. When I mean solid, I mean primarily one color or something that doesn't have a pattern in it, or stencils or other things like that. You will see that these do have brush marks, but this is primarily red. This is red and sort of a violet color, but it's primarily a solid. These are just straight painted papers. I mean, that's pretty easy. Things like this, even though there are multicolors in here, I consider these for the most part solids, because when you tear out smaller bits or pieces and you look at it from a little bit of a distance, it primarily has a single overall color. One other type of solid that I do is these ones, and this one also is on tissue paper, are these really semi-transparent versions in multiple colors. Now these were done on wet strength tissue paper, and I'm going to show you how I did those as well. If you watched my video on the fixing the collage that was too busy, I used these semi-transparent tissue papers to cover up some of the areas that were too busy. So you still saw some of that texture and design through there, but it just sort of muted down some areas, so the busyness was not quite so stark in those collages. Working with tissue paper has its challenges because it's very thin, so we'll talk about that when I get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is obviously just show you how to do some solid painted papers. Again, I'm just using acrylic paint. Most of the time, because these are solid and I don't want them transparent, I will put those on just regular drawing paper or copier paper or whatever paper you have. But you can also do solids on tissue paper. I also use Deli paper. So here are the papers. So this is actually a rice paper. And again, you can see it's sort of semi-transparent. And it just comes in a pad like this. I got this through Amazon. I actually had to order this, I think from the UK Amazon, because they didn't seem to have it in the US Amazon. I believe this is Artway, A-R-T-W-A-Y, rice paper. But again, there's all sorts of different rice papers out there. You can just do some searching and find what you like. I also like this Spectra art tissue because it's bleeding, which means the color will move, but it also is a little bit stronger. So it's kind of like a wet strength tissue paper. It's not like the paper that the tissue paper that you would get to wrap gifts or put in, gift bags and those sorts of things, which is really, really thin paper. This works a little bit better if it's really, really wet, and it's what I did these sort of transparent, well, actually this one's Deli paper. What I did these really thin, transparent ones on. And then finally, the other paper that I use a lot is Deli paper. And again, you can buy these. There's tons of places on Amazon if you do a search for these. And they come in different sizes. I got 12 by 12 ones because my gel plate is actually 12 by 12. And I like working larger because then I've got enough here to work on collages for quite a while before I need to do another batch of papers. I'm also working on scaling up some of my collages and figuring out how I can take the little mini collages I have here and scale them up to make them bigger. So having some bigger papers where I can tear off bigger pieces was also going to be helpful. And then, of course, you can really use any other paper that you have. I have like some old newsprint. I think this actually was sort of packed in something that I may have purchased. And I mean, you really can use any paper that you have. Now, I know there are some people that ask, well, what if it's not archival? You know, if it's not 100% cotton or linen or whatever, and they worry about that. You know, so if that's something that you're worried about, then you'll need to check and obviously limit the papers that you want to use. For me, I figured that these papers are going to last long enough, especially if it's in a piece that I'm selling or keeping as a final piece. All the gel medium or gloss medium or glazing medium that you use to stick this stuff on generally has UV protection in it anyway. So it's going to, once you seal that all in, it's going to offer some protection to those papers that aren't particularly archival or light fast. And then I generally also put a UV varnish over them, especially if I have them on like a wooden panel or a canvas panel or something that's a more stiff surface that I'm going to frame and not put behind glass. I'll actually put also a UV coat of varnish on there. So with all of those things, I mean, it's sealed pretty airtight and it's got some UV protection. So I honestly don't really worry about it. But that's your choice, up to you on how you want to use what papers. So one more option I found for plain papers, and sometimes I do buy paper or, patterns and things like that. But I found online this, I believe it's a rice paper, but it's got, you can see it's got some fabric or threads or something embedded in it. And it comes in all these different colors. So even though it's a solid, it does have some texture to it. And it is kind of fun to use. You'll see when I do my collage sketchbook review for 2024, I used some of this sort of tan orangey color in one of them. And I really like the way it tears because you get these little sort of edges that are a little bit more fun and irregular. But you certainly can buy packs of paper online. There's lots of places that sell collage papers, both plain and patterned. But today what I want to do is just start with creating some plain papers. Just those simple ones that you can do just to have on hand to kind of keep some solid colors for bases of your collage. So the first thing I do is I have a couple of pieces of palette paper here. So we're going to do some with a gel plate and without a gel plate because I know not everybody has a gel plate and they are a little bit pricey. So the first set I'm going to do is actually going to show you how to do these without needing a gel plate. So if you have palette paper, you can use that. I also have these sheet protectors. You can also use that to sort of ink on anything where you can kind of wipe it off or it doesn't stick. Is a good surface. Okay, so I have some plain just copier paper here that's leftover paper. And I'm actually going to rip this in half because I'm going to do some smaller versions. And the first version I'm going to do is I'm going to use this copper metallic. So I have just a separate piece of palette paper that I'm sort of squirting some of that out on. Now I tend to water mine down just a little bit, just so I can roller it. So I've just put a little bit on here and I've sprayed it. And then I have a brayer here. I will shove this over here. And now the metallics are a little bit funny because they're very minerally sometimes. They don't really act like... Now you can spray this first or you can do it dry, either way. And then I just roller on my color. Now, regular acrylics are gonna work much easier because the metallics, again, they're a little bit stickier and a little bit more heavy as far as texture in them. So I'm gonna just do just a little bit heavier, but having a nice metallic option to sort of accent in collages, I think is great. I just started working with it a little bit more with the metallics added in. Now you could also do metallics on black paper, which creates a really, really cool effect as well. So you could either paint some paper black first and then stencil over them or roller over them. Or you can buy like black drawing paper and that sort of thing. So again, that's just a really simple solid that you can do. And again, it doesn't matter what color. I'm going to do another one with this sort of orangey color. Now, if you have, I'm using the Lucas Studio acrylics. These also have what they call liquid, which is a little bit more, it's a little bit softer as far as the way the acrylic comes out. This is more like the heavy body. So you can always spray a little bit of water in it, but the liquid ones probably will work a little bit better. But you can see just using a brayer, and I'm across the center here, so I'm kind of getting a center line, which I don't mind so much. Just rollering out some papers. Now these are not going to be perfectly flat. If you want these actually flat colors, you'll have to get out a paintbrush and paint them by hand. And you may have to do a couple of layers. I don't mind that they're not perfectly solid and have a little bit of texture. That doesn't bother me. Okay. So again, those are super quick and easy to do. And those are just on regular white opaque paper. All right, so let's take a piece of tissue paper and see if we can roller color on that. So I'm going to pick a color that might be a little bit more likely that I would use in something. Okay, so I put this, I believe this is ultramarine blue. Okay, so with the tissue paper, it's a little bit trickier because it's thin. If you have a problem with it sort of not staying down, you could just pre-wet it a little bit. And I just have this sort of misting bottle that I do. And I wet my acrylic a little bit because this is not the liquid acrylic. And then it actually will lay flat. I don't mind the roller marks. Like, I really like the layering effect that happens. And you want to make sure you kind of roll from the middle out so that you're not rolling, because if you do this, it's going to roll back on itself. Okay. And then just, you have to very carefully sort of pick this up and peel it apart. Make sure you can, yep, see, it rips really easy. You have to be very, very gentle with it. Now, you could do this on a separate piece of palette paper and just leave it on that to dry, like pick up the whole paper. So we could also do the tissue paper and do the more semi-transparent ones. So again, what I would do is just sort of wet the paper down. And again, you can use the brayer and just create light texture. And you'll see that there's, you know, it's going to wrinkle. And I actually like the wrinkles in there too. Or you could also do this with a brush. But you want to make sure that you have a super, super soft brush. And you want to do it like as big as you can. And so the idea with this is you're going to use a little bit more water. And I'm just very gently brushing on the color. I don't have much on my palette paper here. Okay, so you have to be very gentle. And again, I pull out kind of from the center out. Okay, and then the best thing is to, you know, do this on a separate paper and just take this away and let it sit and dry. I want to see if I can get this one off. No, it's already ripping. So I'm going to have to just either let this dry a little bit. See if I can get it off. Especially if it's really, really sopping wet. See, this is what happens. It's going to be a big mess. Which actually is okay. I'm just going to let this dry all crinkled like this, and I can use this for a textured paper as well. So I have this really pretty cactus green that I use a lot in a lot of my landscape paintings. I'm going to spray this just to sort of keep it down. I'm not necessarily soaking it. I'm just sort of dampening it. And then I'm going to get my cactus green. Now you could clearly mix this with other colors first, like if you want to mix colors. I want this semi-transparent, or you can make it more solid depending on what you want. And I'm rollering from the middle out to keep that paper from rolling up on itself. Oh, we got a little bit of the copper in there, which is kind of interesting. So even though this isn't a complete solid, when I put it in my collages, for me, it's going to act like a solid, meaning it doesn't have any pattern to it. Now, with the rice paper, it's much sturdier. So I can clearly pick this up and move it to wherever I want. So I'm just going to fill in a few of these little spots. Now, when this dries, I could also come back and put another color over this. Like if I wanted to add a metallic, or I wanted to add some white. Again, I could water it down and do another layer. Is I'm going to use this really, really lime green. This is called chrome green. I've since started getting the bottles with the tubes on, because these ones that have the lids like this always get sort of crudted up. All right, so I've got this other green on here, and I'm just going to leave it on there. Okay, so the other option is if you have, and you can do this on the gel plate too, the same process. You just roller it out, right? and then just throw your deli paper on here. Now, I've found it doesn't really matter which side you use, so it just depends on what side you want to show. Like if you want the shiny side or the non-shiny side. Now I have this mess in here from like where I hit it before, but that's okay. I can always tear that off if I don't like it. Right. So you get this really, really interesting pattern. Again, it's got the brayer marks. I could do another clean off of my brayer and do another pass if I want. And because this deli paper is much stronger, you can get it pretty wet and you don't have to worry about it tearing. And the same is true with this as it was with the rice paper. You could let this dry and do another layer. The nice thing about the deli paper is even though it's sort of semi-transparent, it doesn't go completely transparent, but it's sort of a semi-transparent. But it takes a lot of paint and a lot of water before it gets to the point where you can't manage it. So it's really, I think it's really nice. I use deli paper a lot. Okay, so the other option is to actually use a gel plate. And for this, I generally use my deli sheets or regular paper, just because one, they're 12 by 12, so it makes it really, really easy to have them fit on there. And you'll see that they fit quite easily on there. And here's where I might add a little bit of texture, but still keep it solid. So you'll see this was mostly brown, although there was some teal in there. And then I did some lines in there with a palette knife or a comb or something. So let's do some greens. So I'll pull out a couple of greens. This is an earth green. So it's kind of like a viridian green, I think. Let's see. Yeah. So again, you just brayer this on. And I try to keep it thin, not super, super thick. And then I'm going to throw some of this lime green down here. Oops, that was like a lot. So let me pull some of that off with my color shaper, and I'll just put it on my palette paper over here. This one's clearly more liquidy, so it really wasn't expecting it to come out that quickly. And I'm just going to mix that in. So even though I'm doing solids, I'm going to mix some colors. As long as it's all green or in the green cast, I'm fine with it. It doesn't have to be a single color to be solid. So I'm going to grab my deli paper and get it on there. And I just use my hand, but you certainly could use a roller or something to sort of pick up the paint. And you'll see it should pick up most of that. So now that's really a nice solid color, even though it's got multiple colors in it. So now let's do one with a little bit of a pattern. I think I want to use that green again, but I want to darken it up a little bit. I have a lot of lighter colors. I found that I don't have a lot of darker colors. So I'm going to use that green and add in a little bit of Prussian blue. And maybe I'm going to roller off some of that lime green that's on here. Now I may need more paint. We'll see. a little splotchy. I think I want more of the blue. And the thing about getting it even to mix is you just have to roll her in different directions. Yeah, there we go. That's a nice deep green. Now I have these little tools that have different edges and patterns on them. So if you have those sorts of things, you can use those to make edges on here. So, you know, I could just do some lines. I could just do them straight. Now you want to be a little bit careful with this, that you don't push too hard, because you don't want to damage your Gelli plate. And then we can just do another pull. The other thing you have to be aware of is that acrylic paint dries fairly quickly, especially if you're in a dry climate or you're inside and it's, you know, heat on or air conditioning on. So you need to work probably a little bit quickly in order to sort of keep that stuff wet enough that if you put a pattern in it, it's going to pull properly. So you'll see here, I got some of that pattern in there. Not so much in the zigzag. I think the paint probably had dried already a little bit, but there's a little bit there, so I think it's okay. All right, let's do one more. I have all of this crazy lime green paint over here. So let me put that on. Now this is a little bit thinner paint, so it probably doesn't dry as quick. You can add mediums, like they have retarders and slow dry mediums. If that's an issue and your stuff is drying too quickly, you can certainly add some of those things. Okay, so that's probably a little too green. I'm going to try adding actually some of the turquoise that I have. Let's see what that does. So I'm just adding it with a color shaper, trying not to contaminate my paint. Okay, and I'm going to roller that in. Now again, we're doing solids, and you're like, well, okay, but now you're adding another color. But the overall print, when I pull this, should be a, you know, a solid color. Even though it has multiple colors in it, when I use it in the collage, it's going to act like a solid, especially if I have a lot of other pattern things. All right. So now let's try adding in, let's add in a different pattern. So I have this one. I have to be careful I'm not getting my sleeves in there. Right? So you can still add patterns in here if you want. All right, I'm going to leave a part of this plain. And then we'll go ahead and pull this one. All right, so I can already tell this one's going to be much better with the pattern. The paint was a little bit thicker, and because it was the softer body paint, it was a little more liquidy. It didn't dry as quickly. Now, if you're finding when you pull that the paint's not coming off, you could just leave it sit for a little bit longer and give the paint time to kind of absorb into the other paint that's already on the paper and sort of reactivate the dry stuff that's on the gel plate. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pull this. All right, so this may be too patterny in the part here for a solid, but I think this end would still work. So I recommend, if you want to use tissue paper, to make sure that you get the wet, it's called wet strength sometimes, or art tissue paper. It's made for having some wet media on it. Because you'll see here's the Deli paper. And you'll see it's nice and flat, whereas the tissue paper is going to be a much thinner kind of paper. But we got some really nice greens here. This one dried, and I like the sort of mixture of colors here. Here was the purple one that we did on that sort of brown art paper. Here was the one with the pattern in it that we added some patterns to. I really like the dark green one. And again, this is on rice paper, so it's pretty thick. This was the one that I did on tissue paper that when I pulled off, it got all mangled up, and I just let it dry that way. So the nice thing about this is you can just use it this way, and it will add texture to your collage. If you like to do collages that have texture on them, you can just use it as crumpled. Same thing with this one. It has a little bit of crumpling in it, but I think all of the pieces can be used. And then here's the solid ones we did, the metallic one, which again, I would use sparingly, but it adds a little bit of sparkle sometimes. And then the other couple of green ones that we did. And you can see they're going to be semi-transparent. So once I get the gloss medium on it, or matte medium, or whatever you use to glue it down, it kind of melts away into the layer underneath. I really, really like the colors in this one. So that's the process I go through to do some of my solid papers. Now go have fun making your own. Thanks for watching.